of the late singer-songwriter and song collector, Tommy Makem. In this morning's programme, the influence of his mother, Sarah Makem, the archive recording which made her famous half a century ago when she was discovered by a number of song collectors, Tommy Makem and the links between Cady in Armagh and Dover in New Hampshire, his own migration there, his career as an actor, his time in New York in the early 1960s when Bob Dylan was emerging as a singer, and much, much more. Last Sunday morning we concluded our programme with some introductory material in this short series on Tommy Makem. This morning we continue with some more of the very many recordings in RTE Sound Archive which touch on his world and which relate centrally to his career. But this will be a discursive journey through the archives, as without understanding the music of Armagh and the role played by his mother in song collecting, it is difficult to fully appreciate his later career. When he died at the beginning of August last, Joan O'Sullivan of the News at One summarised Tommy Makem's career, so for younger listeners for whom his early career may not be that familiar, here is part of that report.
I am from Paddy's land, the land of fire and town. I broke the hearts of all the girls for miles around Cady Town.
The boy from Cady Town in County Armagh came to America in the 1950s and in time became more famous there than the Beatles and was hailed as one of the saviours of Irish traditional music. But there was little sign of the huge success that was to come when Tommy first arrived. While working in the mills in New Hampshire, an iron printing press fell on his hand and crushed it. Unable to do manual work, he decided to join his friends the Clancy brothers in New York and try his hand at singing, though neither he or the brothers were confident of success.
I remember we had a mass meeting one time, the four of us, to decide whether we were going to go out with a singing lark or go back to our proper jobs. So we decided to give this singing thing 6 months, which I would do it for a bit of crack. And I think the one thing that stood to us is we didn't give a damn if we were successful or not. We were out to sing a few songs, and we sang them, and I think it was because we didn't care that it all started spiralling.
And spiral it did. Tommy Makem and the Clancy brothers sang traditional Irish songs, but instead of doing so in the traditional slow and melancholy way, they played fast and with gusto. In 1961, they were asked to appear on The Ed Sullivan Show. And before 80 million people and wearing the traditional Aran sweaters that Mrs. Clancy had sent over to protect the boys from the cold American winter, they played Brennan on the Moor. From there, Tommy Makem and the Clancy brothers found themselves catapulted into the big time, and the following year they played before the new American president, John F. Kennedy.
This song is about some people who came and got a rather black welcome. I think all things considered, some of them didn't do too badly.
In New York town, and we took our bags ashore. This was the land of the free. They said we'd see hard times no more. But when we looked for work next day, wherever we'd appear, the fuss so...
Irish journalist Joe Kennedy described their fame.
They were sort of an Irish answer to the Beatles. Indeed, there was some sort of competition in a publication at the time, which were the bigger attraction, and they came out tops, and they outsold Elvis Presley in 1964. I remember that very well.
Earlier that same day, Liam Clancy, for so long his partner, gave his response to the news of Tommy Makem's death on Morning Ireland.
We shared a great hunk of our lives together, as you can imagine, and we were a hell of a team. Tommy was he was a man of high integrity, honesty, and his courage really showed through towards the end, you know. Our paths diverged, of course, many times, but our friendship never waned. He was, I suppose he was my brother in every way.
Can you tell that is Tommy Makem?
On last week's programme we heard part one of this exploration of the RTE archives in search of Tommy Makem's footprint. We mentioned his boyhood in the choir in Cady and his debt to his mother, although we'll be exploring that debt in even greater depth presently. Also his sojourn as a pop singer in a show band. Then came emigration, and as he tells John Skehan on this Words and Music interview from 1991, there was no difficulty in choosing the town in North America to where he would migrate and indeed settle.
The whole Cady sort of an Armagh emigration to Dover, New Hampshire was due to a man during the time of the American Civil War. He had been up in Canada and he sort of wandered down through Maine and eventually ended up in New Hampshire, and he was a weaver from Cady. He had worked in the mills in Cady.
Of course, Cady was a weaving...
flax, linen town.
Yeah.
And he was a master weaver, this man, and he married a woman who was a sister of a Civil War general called General Sullivan. And he stayed around Dover, where I am, and there were people, the mill owners, who owned most of the town, or city as it is now, were called sawyers. And he got a job with them weaving, and they took a look at his work weaving, and they were astounded by how good a weaver he was. And they said to him, are there any more like you where you came from? And he said, yeah, lots of them. Could you get a few of them to come over? So he wrote letters to a few people, and maybe a half a dozen. They would have paid their fare, the sawyers.
This was planned immigration
yes.
against the unplanned
Yes, and there was jobs there for them and everything. And they were delighted to have them because they were all good workers and all wonderful weavers.
But Tommy Makem did not know then that his own fame, if he were ever to win it, would rest on his abilities as a singer. When he emigrated to America, it was with the ambition to be an actor. And this was also true of the Clancy brothers. Tommy Makem was part of a pattern of migration which for centuries was prevalent in frontier societies like North America, what historians have termed chain migration. One member of a family sets forth, chooses a place where there is the prospect of work and security, and prepares a network for other family members to follow in his or her footsteps.
And then that six would have sent for family relations.
Yeah.
And
well, is the tie still there?
The tie is still there, about 100 yards less from where I live. There's an old graveyard, and it's filled with headstones. And a very peculiar thing about them, all the people put their Irish addresses on the headstones.
Do they?
You know, so-and-so, Derrynoose, Cady, County Armagh.
They get the townland.
Yeah, and somewhere in Sligo, and there'd be 3 or 4 from Wexford and a few from Cork, and mostly from Armagh and Monaghan because of the weaving trade.
Well, Dover's a town you feel you can handle, and that you feel at home there.
Oh, it's a wonderful town, yeah. It was an old mill town, and it's now been sort of dolled up. Oh no, it's dolled up, and they have redone up the bricks and made little parks and things. They've done a wonderful job on it. But I arrived there and worked in the mill for a couple of years, hurt my hand, had a bad accident shortly after I got there. People would stop me in the street just to hear me talking. You see, no one had emigrated from Cady for maybe 30 years. I met an old man there who was a lawyer, and from Cady to a little town called Middletown in County Armagh would be maybe 14 miles. And this man had never been to Ireland in his life, but he named every farm from Cady to Long Nancy's pub, and from Long Nancy's into Middletown.
Isn't that lovely?
And he was into cockfighting. And I remember an aunt of mine bringing, my uncles apparently were into it as well.
Yes, so the north of Ireland...
it was illegal, yeah. Well, you could, I remember her bringing a setting of eggs and two fighting cocks back one time. I was a very, very small boy, and she had come home from America, and she was going back by ship, and she took these 2 fighting cocks back with her and a setting of eggs. And my uncles hatched the eggs, and they started a breed of fighting cocks that were notorious throughout New Hampshire and northern Massachusetts. But I left there and I went on to New York and tried to become an actor, and I was fairly successful in the Clancy's.
But your hand being mangled meant that you couldn't work anymore.
No.
Your trade.
Well, I was only doing that to get money that I wouldn't starve when I went to New York, and I went through the usual rigmarole of finding plays and things, and met up, of course, with Tom and Paddy and Liam Clancy, emigrated.
They were on the
same
same circuit as you were.
Yeah.
Looking for the same kind of work.
Yeah, in the theatre, and we got together and we recorded, and Liam and I were in a play off Broadway, a play of Paul Vincent Carroll's called Shadow and Substance, and
well-known play.
It had been running for a while, and it was about to close like in 2 weeks, and off Broadway. And a man came in one night and he said, we're opening a folk club. Would you like to come and sing in it? Because we had done 2 recordings, 2 LPs, before we ever thought of becoming singers. And Liam and I just grabbed the opportunity. It was $45 a week off Broadway acting, and this man offered us $125 a week each to sing a few songs at night, which we'd been doing anyway for the crack. And we went on and stayed on in this place, and Paddy and Tom Clancy would drift in odd night, and we'd all get up together and sing a few songs. But I remember one night, Liam and I were performing, and a young man came over and he said, I have a young lady in here, just come in from Colorado, and do you think you would get her up to sing a song? So I said, of course. It was giving us a break for 15 or 20 minutes. And the girl came up and she had a cast on her leg where she had broken her ankle or something, skiing in Colorado. And she got up and she had a guitar and she sang so beautifully. And it was Judy Collins. And this was her first singing in New York when she came there. And of course, Judy has gone on to great things, and she had a great liking for some of the old traditional songs. She recorded a song, an old sea song, actually a whaling song from Scotland called Farewell to Tarwathie, that I was very impressed with. She's done a lot. She did Yeats' Golden Apples of the Sun, but I was impressed with most of her singing. But this Farewell to Tarwathie struck me as especially good.
Greenland is barren and bare, no seed time nor harvest is ever known there, and the birds here sing sweetly in mountain and dale, but there's no bird in Greenland to sing to